the making of The Last Path, Part 1. Before we begin, if this map looks familiar to you, you probably watch LOTR. Yes, this map was inspired by LOTR's Mount Doom. The concept, while creating the outline, was to establish a high point in the foreground and a wide view of the background. The background consists of low grounds filled with large mountains, inspired by the scene in the movie titled Your Name. In the midpoint, that's where I placed the boss, since it was inspired by Mount Doom. It's reminiscent of the Eye of Sauron. Since the main theme of this game is about Sky, and the opponents are infected birds, we designed the boss structure to look like a colossal mecha bird statue. We tried the various designs for his wings, searching for references. After experimenting with numerous ideas, we finally arrive at this one.
Bruh.
In those metallic wings where his eyes are attached, we have some plans to add some in-game mechanics, especially for those eyes. Additionally, all of his weapons are also attached to those wings, including laser beams and more. In this part, if you remember Colossus of Rhodes, it was a boss in God of War 2 who is a statue, and there's a structure and people living inside of him. That's what we also want to accomplish with this. As for the background, we use AI to get some specific references like this. If you ask which AI we use to generate this, we use Bing Chat, which has a built-in AI image generator called DALL-E. As I mentioned in our previous videos, if you haven't used AI in your art, you're missing something big. It's a great tool for our art references as it's ready-made rather than having to search for it on the search engine. Let's get back to our work, specifically focusing on the foreground, the primary area where the player is positioned and can shoot and move basically. When creating the foreground, we don't really have a detailed plan. The plan is simply to create a basic square flat ground. If you've watched our previous videos, you're already familiar with our art process. When I create art, I always start with the basics. What do I mean by the basic? It means that the art I create will look like something drawn by a kid at first. Basic shapes, forms, colors, and it's less detailed. This concept evolves over time until it reaches the visual style I want it to be. It's like a concept at first, rather than separating the creation of the concept art as its own. The entire process is a concept until it reaches the final product. Like what's happening in here. I'm just going with the flow, adding all the ideas that pops into my mind. It continues and suddenly they become better and better. It takes a lot of my time to create this. But guys, it's worth it. Seeing the result of your work are truly rewarding. I love this part, the creation process of this. Look at these outlines. This is just an extra area. This pathway also has a connection to the story of the game. But the technical process of this part involves envisioning an extra pathway, an idea that struck me as brilliant. So I decided to implement it. The forms and ideas are pre-made in my head, making it easier to translate them into reality. Imagination becomes more expansive each time it's applied on the screen because your mind doesn't need to stress over remembering it. It's right there on the screen, allowing you to imagine even more, and the ideas just keep flowing and flowing. Suddenly, you find yourself pleasantly surprised by the result. Amazing, isn't it?
Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life.
We have a dedicated video showcasing these mountains and volcanoes, and if you want to dive into this particular part, you can find it in our YouTube channel. By the way, the context of this part is that we reworked these mountains many times, never giving up until we achieved a result that satisfied me. After creating this part, I took a moment to relax. Suddenly, while browsing the internet, a pixel artwork caught my attention. Intrigued, I checked the artist's website and explored more of his other works. Anyway, before that, at that time I was also looking for anything that could improve my art. While examining the background of one of his artwork, I became aware of this technique. I didn't know what it was called before, but it's called atmospheric perspective. I had always seen it, especially in cinematic films, but I didn't have any idea that it could also be applied to art. Thanks to the artist, Mark Ferrari. Atmospheric perspective is like when an object is far, its visual details are gradually softened by the background light. I decided to apply it to my art. Before doing that, let's go
Sleep.
Most of you are lazy.
Let's go back for a moment. The layering of my art was a little bit unorganized, and let's fix it first. So what we did first
Sleep.
was to separate them by category. For example, the ground. Clouds in the backgrounds were placed in a single layer. We separated them one by one and created individual file paths for each. After separating the mountain and the volcanoes, that's when we applied the atmospheric perspective by tweaking the opacity, brightness, contrast, and the saturation. And this became the result. Now, let's shift our focus to the castle. I've also created a video specifically dedicated to creating this structure. The castle comes with its in-game mechanics, and you'll get to see all of them in part 2. However, in this segment, our main focus is on the creation of the assets. In part 2, we will cover the application of these assets in the game through the Godot engine. If you can read the written text, that will be one of the game codes. My only plan for this castle is to make the interior look luxurious. The other plan is to implement in-game mechanics for the castle, and that would be cool. We added clouds, fog, or smoke, whichever term you prefer. I saw it in a reference where the environment had fog, and I thought it would be cool if we also added it into our game. This addition not only enhances the scene's immersion but also brings a lively atmosphere to the map. After creating it, we implemented animations to make it move around dynamically. Additionally, we adjusted the opacity of some elements to achieve a realistic foggy appearance. Now, let's talk about the lava. As you can see, the color is just plain orange, so let's put details into it. I experimented with this part, practicing with the colors, and I didn't expect the outcome to be this good. So I decided to stick with this color palette for the lava, and we applied it to the other parts as well. Since it was a larger lava, I had a hard time applying it, and after many retries, we finally got it right. After that, let's make animations for it because I thought it would be good to give the background environment some movement to make it look more interesting and less flat. For the last step, I focused on creating the lighting and the ambience of the scene. I achieved this by lowering the brush opacity, adjusting the color through a sprite adjustment tools, adding some effects, and finally changing the layer mode to screen. Now the lighting looks dynamic, and with that we have completed the process. If you're still watching, thank you, and I'll see you in part 2. I wish you have a wonderful day.
I made that bitch famous.